Yeah, so
Wrong.
uh, I'm
Thanks.
a I'm a software engineer right now, and I was
Oh, sick.
wondering, yeah, thanks. I was wondering, like, is there a way to leverage that to break in into industry?
What do you do specifically?
Mostly web dev.
Um, like website stuff?
Yeah, like microservices. I use a lot of Node.js, Go, and yeah, I mean, I've used a lot of languages and a lot of
Yeah.
frameworks.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, what do you want to do in the industry specifically?
Well, I've always been excited about being a concept artist,
Okay.
and I think I want to focus on characters.
What made you go into software engineering?
Mostly because the art program I was in was terrible.
Sure.
So I was thinking I might as well look into something else, and somehow I stumbled on computer science and really liked it.
Yeah, programming's fun. I like programming.
Yeah, I still like programming. I just hate programming for enterprise.
Got it. Okay, so um, because the reason why we got to ask this is because I mean, you just said it. You don't like to do it like programming for enterprise, but it's because of that very thing is why you decided to go into concept art. And the reason why you want to, or like the thinking of how can I leverage this skill to then become a concept or get in there or whatever,
Mhm.
is that same mentality is the same mentality that got you in this mess in the first place,
Mhm.
right? And so you got to be very cautious of that, meaning that like how do I can just kind of like get a job, get a gerb,
Mhm.
and you want to get the gerb you want, not the one that you could easily obtain with whatever subset of skills, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So you got to be very cautious of that. So the ultimate answer is there is nothing, there is no direct connection between concept art and uh, computer engineering or software engineering. I mean, you know, other than developing tools, maybe, right?
Mhm.
Like if you created like a tool that would help you design characters better, but that would just be for you anyway, probably.
Yeah.
And you
Mhm.
could probably make a buck from putting it out there and licensing it, whatever. But you see my point,
Mhm.
because there's in the 12 years of I've been working as a concept artist, there's no need to program. You know,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
my skills as an artist gave me nothing when it came to programming. you know,
Mhm.
but what it does do is it allows me to marry the two, like the art and the programming. So the thing that I do have an advantage now in is that I understand the power of like programming, and I use that knowledge to make art better,
Mhm.
art that I can make. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it. It'll just make you a good game dev essentially, right?
Mhm.
Because you can do art and program. That's pretty much what you need. Um, but most jobs that they will never require you. So it'll just be like cool stuff. Maybe like if you're using Blender, you can like use Python to automate a lot of or create a lot of procedural type things for you.
Mhm.
But ultimately, you still have to paint over it. Maybe you can design a machine learning algorithm, but that's like a whole different field. It's not the same. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm a software engineer now. I know how to do all programming things." No, I get
Yeah.
that too.
Mhm.
I'm like, for instance, I'm starting to learn like how to do math and stuff instead of just hard programming. Like I'm actually learning math and math sorts because you need to know that to do any kind of shading and like graphics type stuff. meaningfully. And same thing with like just doing like hardcore game programming, you know,
Mhm.
like being able to find like the dot product, for instance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but
Mhm.
like, but that's really useful rather than sending a bunch of raycasts, you know, and then just hopefully clipping something. It's better just to use straight up good old geometry and trigonometry to determine like how things are working, you know?
Yeah.
Just good old physics and stuff like math.
Mhm.
Um, but that's kind of the point I'm making is that like none of that helps me as an artist, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's true in the reverse. Like not like knowing how to do like a dot product is not going to make you know anatomy, you know?
Mhm.
But what I will say is that like that mentality of like being systematic is greatly rewarded um, in terms of like understanding, as you probably know from being in my class. Like um, I'm very methodical. I think things through quite a bit, you know.
Yeah.
That skill did transcend to programming, right?
Mhm.
And it helped me as an artist. I originally wanted to be a programmer because I already believed that I had this kind of capacity, you know?
Mhm.
But it was just like stupid hard. I didn't want to do it. And so I was like, I'll just do something easier. And ironically, art is harder than programming, especially like basic kind of programming, which seems odd. It seems like, no, programming should be harder. No, programming
Mhm.
has very clear cut solutions to many problems, right?
Yeah.
Um, like you can code something really janky, and if it works, like nobody will know.
Yeah,
You
there's
know?
so much jankiness in
Yeah, you know what I
poetry.
mean. Like you could, but like if it works, nobody questions it. You know.
Yeah.
But if you draw like one extra finger on a character, everyone's gonna see it. You know.
Yeah.
You can't hide behind your imperfections. Where art, like where programming, you totally can, and then the next programmer has to deal with it. You know.
Yeah.
This is why I've grown like a better appreciation for like YouTube, for instance, because people are like, oh, the YouTube algorithm, like, why don't they get their act together? It's like, consider the problem they're trying to solve, right? Of millions of minutes of content uploaded every hour, you know, and every piece of content, there's a chance of it being super bad, you know.
Mhm.
When there was that shooting in New Zealand, or was it New Zealand or Australia? But like basically the shooting that happened that was really tragic. People were like uploading like this live stream of this guy murdering people, and Facebook and YouTube were like all hands on deck, and they still couldn't stop it at the rate it was coming in. It was just too much, too hard, you know. I
Mhm.
mean, now it's handled, but like the time that it happened, it was like a real mess. And I always try to explain to people that the algorithms are really challenging um, because the problem that they're solving is really a really hard problem. There's a lot of stuff outside of just like straight zeros and ones, but also it's like they might have built their infrastructure, like the YouTube algorithm in general, like the whole YouTube platform might have been built on a really flimsy infrastructure, and they're just trying to like fix it now, like go back. But when you already have like millions and millions and millions of content users and creators, right? It's really hard to kind of like just start a new thingy, you know?
Yeah.
And so like my appreciation for that grew exponentially when I started learning how to program and stuff like that. I wasn't just some sort of rando now. I'm just like, come on, just do it, bro. It's like, no, it's definitely a thing. Um,
That's that's what pretty much all product managers say. Just do.
yeah, no, like the people who don't know like how challenging it can be, um, because ultimately people who are coding are like the code is still written by people, and people make mistakes all the time, and people aren't like they don't know what's going on. Like when you think about like YouTube, you think of like this kind of like entity, right? Not like a person or a series of people. You just think of it as like one god named YouTube, and of course YouTube uh like YouTube has an agenda, right? And of course they're like crazy evil and all this stuff. No, they're probably just they're trying to figure it out, dude. They're trying to figure this stuff out, and no amounts of money makes people smarter, you know.
Yeah.
And so like I said, that has value, a broader understanding of things, right? And that will help you as an artist. But again, it won't make you paint better. It'll just make you understand more, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if you really wanted to try to like dip your toes in, I would say become like a technical artist. Do something like, again, building tools or finding creative solutions to making things, um, you know, with your coding knowledge.
What's a technical artist?
Technical artist is someone who's like right in between, right? A good example is like, so people who are technical artists will like go into a game engine and make tools for their artists. Like an artist is like, man, I really hate that, you know, this game engine won't allow me to do this thing. It's so obvious that I should be able to do this thing. For instance, me and my buddies were working on a project, and they were like, what? Why can't I move this object a very specific way? Like they would like grab an object and then I guess like control click, and when they would do that, it would put that object right where they control clicked. And then my other buddy was like, no, I think that's only at work, you know. And he's like, what? It's not a default Unreal thing, you know. And he was like,
Yeah.
no, like the technical artist built that for us. That's what a technical artist does, right? A technical artist like understands the value of like making tools easier for the artists, you know.
Yeah.
And also solves art problems technically. Like
Uh-huh.
they'll help with like shaders and make them look more badass, you know.
Yeah.
They'll understand light and color, you know, but they'll try to create it in a way that makes it more feasible. Like I'm essentially becoming a technical artist is what's happening, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I not only am I learning the technical aspect of it, I'm learning how to manipulate that and be able to control it. Not too much of a technical artist because I'm not building tools from the ground up yet, but I'm technical enough that I understand what's going on now. And that's a career, and that's a really high-paying job and a really well sought-out job for obvious reasons, right? Because not that many people are these like two genre people who can do both technical things and they're like good at drawing
Uh-huh.
or understanding art, like what the artist's needs are, and being able to translate that technically, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of technical artists do shader stuff, tools. They help make the tools better. These types of things, you know. Like you'll see, like in like the making of, like yeah, you know, our engineers helped us create this tool that will allow us to do this thing. That's what technical artists are. A good example is like when they did like the Into the Spider-Verse, like they had engineers who developed like that machine learning algorithm that would determine when the lines would be drawn onto the face dynamically. Like those lines are dynamically being put in. It's not hand painted in. Like those
Nice.
all are dynamically coming in. And what they would do is it would have an artist design like so the machine learning algorithm would come in. Let me give you an example of what it looks like. It'll be like, okay, you know, here's like the eyebrows, you know,
Yeah.
and then like that's what they determine based off of like the way that the animator like, you know, furrowed the brow, whatever. And then the machine's like, this is what we think it's supposed to be. And then the artist is like, oh, that's pretty close, but maybe what we can do here is just like, you know, just kind of curve it a little bit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then make it like maybe do this a little bit and add another line right here. It's like, that's the correct answer. And then the machine algorithm's like, all right, got it. And it'll put it into the thing. And then so the next time the animators furrow the brow this way, it's like, yeah, this is what it should be. And they did enough that I think it was like one of those things where they say it took like a year to just make like 6 seconds. And
That's cool.
I think a lot of that was because they were just trying to figure it out. But it was like, it then made it seem like the whole movie took forever to do. But no, it's like, because once they got that 6 seconds and figured it out, then everything else obviously fell into place, you know?
Yeah. Also, your dude looked like Cthulhu when you had the eyebrows.
I'm all about that Cthulhu. That would be my answer to you, madam.
Thanks. Oh,
So
well,
you
the
know
other,
JavaScript then, right? You should check an
yeah,
engine, a 3D game engine called Play Canvas. It's pretty good.
yeah. The other thing I was considering was working on indie games.
You should definitely do that.
Yeah,
Um, that's something that's a real thing. I'm doing it.
yeah,
You should get, yeah, if you're really good at JavaScript, because if that's what you do, you should look at Play Canvas.
yeah. I'll do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I could show you a little bit of it right now. Let me just kind of put some more effort on this. Um, but yeah, it's basically a 3D web game engine. Um, yeah, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no more adjectives. It's a 3D game engine on the web. Yeah, that's it.
Mhm.
It's really cool. Yeah, let me show you what's up. I'll take a break on this. Any other questions as I pull up my Play Canvas account? You can't understand why people would share like the murdering of innocent people. It's the same
Yeah.
reason. It's the same reason why that person went around murdering people. Just people are dumb. I believe it's like 1 out of 1,000,000 people, something like that, are potential sociopaths and psychopaths.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think it's like that, something like that. It was something pretty big, but it's like okay, or it was like 1 out of 100,000. It wasn't actually much smaller. So it's like somewhere like 3 million people in America are potential sociopaths and psychopaths. It was a really high number.
Wow.
So you can imagine. It's just that most sociopaths are also wise enough to know that murdering people isn't a good tactic. But like stealing from them, lying, cheating, robbing them, manipulating them, these types of things. Is much more lucrative, right?
Do you think that maybe the environment where they're in influences that? Because I heard of a statistic, and I heard that at a comedy show, so don't take that as fact.
It's
But
fact.
it's plausible to think that so the biggest number of suicides occurs in wealthy countries like
Yes.
Sweden and Japan and stuff like that. And I'm thinking that uh, people that are starving in very poor countries, you don't hear about that. And maybe that's just because they are not on the spot. But if you think that most sociopaths like appear in also rich countries, wouldn't you think that there's a cultural fact
It could
related?
be, yeah. I think you're onto something. And whoever talked about that, the suicide one, I can tell you why that it's a status and a standard problem. So
Mm,
if you are the person in your neighborhood who has 2 chickens and the person next to you has 4 chickens, you're jealous, but it's like whatever, right? I
right.
can get 2 more chickens eventually if I want, you know.
Mm,
So if you
yeah.
live in that kind of society where like wealth is not that like distant, then there's very little like conflict usually between those two people. Usually, what gets those people are other stuff like dysentery and like
Hmm.
malnutrition, like real problems.
Right.
Um, but when there's like I'm living in like a low income environment, all my friends are like on drugs and they're either in gangs, and then there's people who are like on golf carts, riding with diamond teeth, um, playing like golf, every day of their life, and
Hmm.
they were born into that, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, that high contrast, because it's so far removed, it feels clearly unobtainable, which it is in a lot of cases, right? Mostly, that seeps in, and it's like, and it doesn't even have to be like that's a little far across, but there's like people who just have even they can go to Starbucks often, like that too is enough of a discrepancy. to
Yeah.
make you feel jealous, more anxious, because then you know that you are poor, you know that you have nothing, you're worthless comparatively to everyone
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
That's what seeps in. So that's why like countries like Japan specifically have it worse than Korea, because their standard of societal status is really high. You know,
Yeah.
I know like in
Also,
China, like if you don't have two homes, then why are you even living on this planet? You know, if you're a woman, what are you doing? You're worthless. You know,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it is a
Uh,
cultural thing for sure.
there's also the fact that in Japan that the suicide is also something historically good for keeping your honor. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know
uh,
all about that stuff, but I know in the past definitely was that. You know, like
person can do his job well. It's better to kill themselves than to
yeah.
live
So
in shame.
That's a jacked up way to keep you.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's still culturally relevant. I know in the past definitely it was, right? But I don't know if they've still adopt that. I don't think so. But I know like it's still kind of in the bones, you know. So I don't disagree with that. But I don't think they like will say, "Oh, you didn't follow the paperwork properly."
Oh yeah, yeah,
Hand them
yeah.
a knife, and then just like
What I think
I don't think
is
they do that.
yeah. What I think is based on an idea because I lived in a lot of places, like very different places. I lived in Japan for a year, and when I went to the United States, that time that we met, I realized something interesting about race, how different peoples deal with racism, because you can see culturally how do they like for instance in Brazil we got a very racist culture too, just like it happens in US. Yeah, and we are a very like mixed country.
Uh-huh.
Like we have all sorts of people
So you
here.
have all sorts of opportunities to be racist.
Yeah, and what I found it was interesting is that when did segregation end in United States? I don't remember the date, but
It
it
was
wasn't
somewhere in
long.
the '60s, I believe.
Yeah,
'60s,
so
'70s.
it's not a long time ago,
It wasn't. No.
right? And now you have a cultural structure with a bit of segregation, not necessarily in a bad way, but as a solution for people to live along. So you have even a certain dialect for different races there that doesn't happen here. Like we only have dialects depending on regions, not necessarily our race, and we are more intolerant about stereotypes than people are over there, as far as I could tell, you know. So I don't know if because in Japan the samurai era didn't end like 400 or 500 years ago. It was like 200 years ago. It wasn't that a long time ago.
Yeah. So I still think that they don't have that tradition because like
Yeah,
I think it's just kind of like the high stakes honor stuff is what stuck, but I don't think that suicidal part is part of it. I think it's true for other nations that didn't have like kind of a suicide pact, right? Like America's another one. We're not that far behind, you know, and we didn't have any of that, you know, and it goes all the way back to the societal standard in the culture, right? And getting back to
right.
kind of the original problem that we're talking about, like this sociopathic thing, that could also be a cultural thing, an environment thing. But it also makes sense that genetically it would happen.
Sure.
But like the reason why it might stick larger in cultures like ours and in modern society is because those people thrive in this society, right? Like if I am willing to be able to pay my employees less without any remorse, if I am okay with backstabbing people that I work with so I can get better deals, that
Right.
in a capitalist environment is rewarded. And if you haven't seen a great example of this before, we finally have one. It's our
Yeah.
president. You know, he literally is lying and talking crap all the time, backstabbing on like I literally was laughing out loud. I was driving, and someone like reported that he never heard of WikiLeaks before. Like he said it, and
Really?
I was laughing, dude, because that's all he could talk about in 2016. And I
Right.
was like, dude, this guy, man. But if you think about it, before when nobody can see this stuff, when he was just talking like this to just random people in the business world, this is why
Was
he
not
was
in the
able to do.
spotlight.
Yeah, this is why he was able to like get across like all these different businesses, start all these programs that all ended up as failures, except for like one or two, right? And
Right.
and went bankrupt like several times. But unlike me and you, he had the luxury of having tons of money in the bank. He can make he can definitely. It's like if you've ever played somebody in poker and they have the chip lead, like a dramatic chip lead. Let's say they have like 80% of all the chips. And you're still in the game, and let's say you and another person, and they're sharing the other 20%. If you go in on a hand, you go in, and you're hoping that you got something, right? Because if you keep on betting, you're going to eventually just lose. It doesn't matter. So you have to be very cautious of when you're going in. But if you have 80% of the chips, you can keep going all in every hand, and knowing that the other person either will just have extremely bad luck and go in all in on the hand that you went all in and lose, or if they don't go on, you take a little bit of their money, every time.
Yeah.
So it's an inevitable loss. And that's what happens when you have like this uber rich people who are just born into this. It's an exponential thing, you know what I mean? And people who don't recognize that are idiots. And it's like it's clear to me that it's happening even with my own wealth and my own value, right? For instance, my dad was born and raised in a impoverished situation, right?
Right.
A lot of my cousins and uncles are in jail, right? I come from I'm a half black, half Korean. They're like, you were talking about segregation wasn't that long ago. I know exactly what you're talking about, man. Like my grandma was there when segregation was still around. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like my grandma.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not like I don't know somebody. It wasn't like that long ago. Like it's not like the people who first came on the boats, which by the way wasn't that long ago either. That's like my great grandfather. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like it's really
ago.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that long ago. Like it's someone that like I know somebody that might have known somebody that was a slave at one point. That's crazy. And so the point I'm making is that my dad joined the military. He got out of that situation. He was able to then get me and my mom out of put us in a position of entitlement, right? We had some privileges because of my dad's good choices in life, right?
Right.
And my dad was a computer engineer too, so he was a smart guy, and so he was able to make sure that I was smart, and because of that, I was able to make choices and do stuff that made me wiser. I was able to go to school for art, for instance, which seems like a weird thing to be able to do, but like that was just one step that my father allowed for me to have that opportunity, right? Now it wasn't like things were easy. I still had to try it, but the fact that it was just I had an understanding that these things were even available to me, and I had someone in my life that demonstrated the power of knowledge and acquiring it, I did not feel any fear to do so.
Right.
And now I have children. We live in one of the richest cities in all of America, right? It's so rich we can barely afford living here, I make good income. I still can barely live here, but they're going to one of the best schools. They're getting the best education possible. For instance, my son can already count to 100, do basic arithmetic and read some words, and he's not even in kindergarten yet. He hasn't even started school officially. And you're supposed to learn how to count to 100 at the end of kindergarten, and he's already got that. They all know how to use technology. They understand what technology is, right? They know what it takes to be smart, and they will have that advantage ahead of time. So my greatest fear is that my great-grandchildren are going to be entitled idiots. You know what I mean?
I get it.
Because my son or maybe their children are going to be millionaire, billionaire, like genius people. They're definitely going to like level up even further. You know,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
exponential curve is what I'm getting at. And so ultimately in like these modern societies, you do have that, right? That's
Yeah.
why the gap is increasing, because it's an exponential one, right? Sure, maybe Trump's family came in here with legitimate, like, values and concerns, and they built that wealth earnestly, but because it was so rapid, the children of their children are going to be completely dumbfounded. They don't know at all how and why they don't deserve that wealth,
Well, I agree with you. What I'm thinking is there's a cultural fact as well. Like Trump is an idiot, and you're not. You're not going to allow your children to be idiots.
Well,
And
that's what I'm saying. Eventually it will be removed. I won't be in the equation anymore, and my children might not be either. It is, I think, it's an inevitable problem unless they built like strong traditions within my family that like cannot be shaken or broken somehow. But I can't tell. But
right.
before we should definitely stop the conversation here, because I did want us to get back to talk about art. But getting to like kind of the kind of the premise, which was more art related and stuff like this, like because there are people even in our industry that they act and behave this way, you know. And I only know like maybe like two people that I can say with confidence that are pretty crazy individuals, right? And I won't name them because I'm a big fan of like, it's no one's business. I'd rather people experience it for themselves, type of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But it's funny because once people start talking to me, like, man, there's this person that I ran into, and dude, they're just like so crazy. Like, oh, this was happening, and I'm like, oh yeah, let me tell you all about them. That is the time that we can disclose, because only until I feel you have stumbled upon this. But I will say that 99% of like everybody else is really awesome and pretty down to earth and awesome people. So you don't have to be too cautious. But like one of my friends was like weirded out by this person. One person in particular, and I told him the kind of stuff that we're talking about, like the sociopathic stuff, and he was just like, I was like, being a good artist doesn't mean you can't be crazy,
Yeah.
or evil,
Yeah.
even, being a dick does not stop you from making good artwork. And this person that I'm thinking of and referring to is one of the greatest artists in our industry and is really admired by many people. And to give you a context of how much this person's a scumbag,
I think I know who you're talking about.
well, I don't know. We'll behind closed doors we can talk about it. But like, this person basically referred to their fans as just meat bags with ideas. He basically like said he hates talking to his fans, and I was just like, "What the fuck, dude?"
Wow.
Said that out loud, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. When I began expanding my business, I realized that this is not for me. Going like super high level, I realized I don't even want to be famous at that level either. I want to kind of like just behind the curtain, because it's too much stress that I don't want. And the stress that you get is the kind of stress that will require you potentially to, like eviscerate your relationships with people who might have even got you there in the first place,
Yeah. I
And
get it.
I know people like that, and I don't want to do that. And it's so the solution is to stay small, to be mobile, and to if I do make a good amount of wealth, be like the guy who made all those Jim Carrey movies. You guys know who I'm talking about? The director who made all those movies? Yeah, exactly. You don't know. That's the point. And he basically sold all of his riches and all of his goods, and he like lives in like a trailer and drives a motorcycle around all the time. And nobody knows who he is, and he's kind of crazy. He's really a shit. But nobody knows him by name. But he's the one that directed like Liar Liar, Ace Ventura movies. Like he did all those like really good classical.
You got a few people that are crazy and humble. Still like Keanu Reeves. Like this guy doesn't have any bodyguards. He lives in a small apartment, and there's all those.
And it's because he got hit with real life, man. Like it was one of those moments where all that fame and wealth didn't matter. It didn't stop him from losing the very people that he loved the most. You know,
Yeah, that's true.
something similar happened to Zack Snyder, right? He lost his daughter in a
Yeah.
horrible
Yeah.
car accident. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank; it didn't save her. You know, and it's when you
so
have
sad.
that something like that happen to you, it definitely sculpts your character. And he basically was like, yeah, I'm just gonna stop making movies, dude. Like what's the point of making movies? Like, why am I doing this stuff? You know, and that's really insightful. And I agree. Like, why, if you don't want to, don't do it. You know, like, and so I think he's like, you know, I've been wasting my time like making these like blockbuster movies, trying to make other people happy, when the people I care about the most are not getting my time. Like, what am I doing? I have money already. I have the wealth. Why am I wasting it? You know?
Wow.
And that's really profound. And that's something I hear this types of stuff. I hear these kinds of stories, and I'm like, yeah, I want that. I don't really want anything else. And yeah, so I always try to encourage my students to do what they want to do, not get a job. Does that make sense? Because if you do what you want to do and you become really good at it, the job will inevitably come in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, sure.
But if you're focused on only getting in and only getting that work, you might be hustling way too hard. Like, you gotta hustle. And it's like, but for what? What are you hustling for? You know, just to make money? Like, come on, man. And as we were just talking about earlier about like the suicide rates and like all this stuff, you know, a lot of these celebrities are really depressed, really anxious. Many of them are losing to drugs and drug abuse because they can't maintain like a lot of that status.
Connection.
Yeah. You know, not everybody could be like Will Smith, who's like super positive all the time and doesn't really care. He looks at acting as like a job, you know, and he just does it and just moves on. He doesn't think he's better than anybody else. He doesn't think of like, he doesn't have any other thing on his mind other than just make movies and hang out with his
you know, I think that comes with maturity as well. Like, I remember the first time that I had some success lately here in my country, and it was like the first time I climbed on a stage to sing after I started taking singing classes. It was I went really well. The audience loved it, and I was thinking too much of myself. Like, I was thinking I was the shit, you know.
As we know, yeah.
It was not that good, but I was thinking that because of the reaction of everybody. And after that, I realized how obnoxious I was being. So I started to diet down, and like 10 years later, I started to work for this company here, and they are very famous. So I kind of got a lot of notoriety because of the work I've been doing for them. And this kid recognized me on the supermarket. And I think that I think that it came at a point that small success came at a point where I could handle it because I wasn't a dick anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So I treated him like super well. Like, I talked to him, like I gave him some tips for artistic knowledge and all.
That's cool.
And he was like super excited to have met me. Like, he took a picture with me and all. I was really happy for him. And I was really happy for myself that I was not an idiot anymore, you know, like, okay, now you were in the success, you know. So I think that at some point there are people that can't handle it the same way that you were talking about the future of your children. Like, there's a construction inside everybody. Like, it comes also down to how you're wired to deal with that, you know.
Yeah.
And how you react to those things. Because in my history, I had my share of stupid people talking shit to me, you know, and I said, I don't want to be that guy, you know.
Yeah, you know, and sometimes people don't have that experience. They don't meet people of this time. But like I said, we should take a couple more questions from anybody that has any. But I do agree that like some people do not have the experiences of like true failure, and then that will shape them in the way that we hate.
Yeah.
I don't like those types of folks. Any other questions about art or what have you?
I would have one, but I would like to give the space to other people because I talk too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Me too, man. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like I agree with you about like the job and stuff like that, and like don't work for your own goals and stuff like that, and instead of just kind of grinding for the job. But I know but you also gotta crawl before you walk, and
Yeah, totally.
and you know what I'm saying. So I mean, I guess my question is just like, because I'm trying to, because I definitely want to get in.
Yeah,
Not just to get in, just to make money, but also I got my own goals I want to, meet. But yeah, like so, like is some of the stuff like the thumbnailing? Is that like taking fires? Is that like the basic thing that you do? Because like I said, I'm just trying to figure out like because I haven't been doing this for that long. Just found out about concept art last year,
cool.
and just like and because I went into animation school and just didn't like the animation here in Minnesota sucked ass. And I was like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you can't giving me books instead of showing me how to do stuff. And but yeah, just want to figure out like the ins and outs. I've been doing my research too, but at the same time, it's just like I know there's some
Sure.
small things you need to know, like
Well, thumbnailing is a process that I do, but at a higher level, right?
Right.
So remember how we were talking about like dribbling the ball?
Mm-hmm.
And at first you got to learn how to just dribble, but eventually you gotta make some moves. So what you're watching now, this technically, I mean, it's already kind of a little bit over. I went a little bit too far, but this technically would be like a thumbnail for me,
Mm-hmm.
And hearing that would, bring like, make you feel way like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
And the reason why that happens is because, you would have a harder time to try to create something of this nature, right? But that's only because I have that experience. That's all it is, right?
Right.
And whenever I tell people that you need to be better at doing thumbnails, it's because I'm trying to teach people how to iterate more rapidly. Most artists tend to not iterate.
Right.
They tend to just kind of like, they tend to just start like designing a thing, but it doesn't take them a couple of minutes. It takes them days and hours and like forever, right?
Right.
And a thumbnail, like the first sketches should be quick. They should be real quick and real clear. And that's really hard to do. And you got to practice. You got to do something.
Yeah.
And so the thumbnailing, like, as you can tell, like as you were doing it, you were getting better at finding new ideas. But at first it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine if you have a client and they asked you, hey, we want you to do like, a good series of designs in a day, like maybe like 5 or 6 designs.
Right.
And they don't want them as sketches. They want them pretty clear and almost done.
Right.
Are you going to be able to do that? And the answer is probably no, right? It's going to be super hard.
Right.
And that's why you're not working just yet. You understand?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But once you're able to, like, if I say to you, hey, I want you to like do like this kind of sketch, you have like, a day, like basically tomorrow in dailies, we're gonna take a look at it, and you do it. Next day you have like, 5 sketches or what have you, and they're like really well defined.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can talk about like what we can do to move forward, like what we want to do to improve, or what is there missing from your designs, what should we add, and then you just do that again the next day.
Yeah.
When you start to work, it's like as soon as you get the job, they expect you to do the job.
Right.
Not like a grace period. And doing thumbnails and learning how to iterate and doing all that stuff is just tools to make you better, ultimately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so yeah, thumbnailing is by far one of the greatest tools you can try to master.
Yeah.
I design that way all the time.
Right.
It may not look like it, like I said, it may look like I just like have all these ideas floating in my brain, but the reality is I don't. I just have really trained my subconscious quite a bit. The best way I explain this is that imagine, when you're walking down the street and you trip and you fall, do you think about catching yourself, or do you just catch yourself from falling?
You catch yourself.
Yeah. So being a good artist is similar to that.
Right.
It doesn't sound the same. It sounds like being a good artist is different than like physical muscle memory, right? But as you'll find out in my class, that it absolutely is all physical.
Oh, definitely.
Like people think of, being a good artist as some sort of like ethereal type of thing, but the reality is like, no, it's all physical. It's a physical skill in the way that we think of physicality, meaning when I take a hammer to your arms, I will break your arms. And if I take a hammer to your brain, I will break your brain.
Right.
If I take it to your parts of your brain that control certain aspects of your language, then you will have a harder time speaking languages. If it controls your memories, you'll have a harder time maintaining memories. If you have your motor skills, you're going to have harder motor skills. Depth perception, harder sense of depth. You see my point?
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever people start to combine those two ideas together, so you start to realize, oh, okay, my ability to be a good designer is a physical attribute that I need to train and acquire. Then they start to train and acquire it. But if you start to call every day, like, I can't draw today for whatever reason, or I have like these hurdles in my mind, you start treating it like with too much mentality, as like there's like some sort of like mental game that you're trying to play against.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you, like, you can genuinely, whether you know it or not, right, train yourself to do these things. It's just faster if you're cognitive of it, if you're aware of what you're trying to put into your brain. Meaning, like, when I'm trying to learn anatomy and I'm constantly paying attention to how I'm learning my anatomy, what I'm learning from my anatomy, then I learn it faster. But if you were just to like grab like a series of anatomy books and every day just draw an image out of every book, it's going to be real hard. And when you try to translate that to paper or to your own design, you're not going to translate it well. But every time you try, again, you're not paying attention. You're just doing it, just by the act of just doing it.
Yeah. You
will eventually just be able to do it.
Right.
And what ends up happening in that scenario is that you won't be able to explain why or how you do it.
Right.
It'll be that deep in your subconscious.
Right.
Yeah. Where for me, it's not so deep, like, because I was consciously aware of what I was learning, whole time, because I wanted to get good fast, and that was the best way to do it. And so,
I was going to say, I'm kind of the same kind of way in my approach to doing things. I mean, I just like to experiment and just kind of push and push and push. And if I fuck up, I just say, okay, I fucked up. But then I look for what did I fuck up on, and then I say, okay, this is why I messed up. Let's do it again. Do some more because I want to get good. Like like anybody does. Like I play a game. When the boss kills me, I get pissed, and I say, okay, I'm gonna same approach.
Well, I will say that not everybody does it.
Right.
Because when it comes to art, people separate typically. A video game is designed, for instance, for you to stay there, right? A bad video game would turn you off once you, like, imagine playing Super Mario Brothers and you start at the last level. You know what I mean? It'll be really stressful.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't play it anymore. You'd be like, this game's way too hard. But it doesn't. It starts you at levels in which you probably can do something,
Right.
And you build up to it. And so by the time you get to the last level, you should be pretty skilled.
Yeah.
The problem with being a good artist is that you're at the last level every day, and because you could see what the other people are doing that are at that last level and you're not there yet,
Right.
And so that's the big difference, is that real life isn't designed to be pleasurable and easily incremental, you know, but it absolutely is. It's just not designed to be perceived that way. And so most people tend to, again, like specifically with art, tend to treat art as if you got it or you don't type of thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's definitely a learned thing.
Yeah, but like, yeah, art is not perceived this way, and that's why it's so hard. But if you start to realize, no, like if I just put time in, and I did a stream with my buddy last night, and he made a really good point about like how, because he's saying, you know, it doesn't feel linear, but it definitely is linear, and he gave a good example of like how when he was like weighing himself every day when he's trying to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Like it would go like he'd lose like 2 pounds like one day, and then the next day, like when he'd lose 1 pound one day and lose like another pound like another day, and then on the third day he gained like 3 pounds.
Right.
And he's like, oh man, you know. But he said he kept with it, and he kept the chart, and he would look at it on a larger graph over a span of like a few months. And he says when you do it that way, you see the you see how it what you call it, how it is linear. It goes in a straight line,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it doesn't feel that way. It's like if you're looking at my screen for now, it's like this.
Right.
You know? You see that kind of like the lines that I'm drawing, how it's like going up and like, but if you were to draw like the average line between those values, it's linear and it's going up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But we don't see it that way, right? We have the ups and then we have the downs, and we have the ups and then we have the downs, but it's like slowly building up.
Right. Yeah, I definitely had that because it's been 3 years now, and I started dropped out of school for it because I wanted to do a comic with a friend. That didn't work because he moved to China.
How dare he?
And I know, right? And then just started practicing. Wanted to get in animation because I liked anime, and realized that animation that I want to do is not in America. It's in Japan, in China. And I said, well, let me figure out something. And came across your stuff on ArtStation.
Sweet.
You know, saw your stuff about this. That was summer after I dropped out of the animation program, and just been learning about values, and because I could sketch, I could do anatomy and stuff like that because I was animating and drawing characters and stuff like that. But I wanted to draw like, I was like, how these mofos make these dudes look 3D, and it's, you know, you know.
Yeah. I will say, you know, you should be very careful with like the statement of like, I know how to do anatomy because of animation. You might not actually. I have students who would do this, who will say like, oh, you know, I know how to do it, and then every time I'm asking them to do it, they can't do it.
Oh.
And it's a trap.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what ends up like I talked about this earlier in class too. Like, never trust your intuition. You know, challenge your intuition, right? Because if you really did know anatomy, right, then draw me a photorealistic looking person from your memory. You know, and you can't. So there must be some things missing there, isn't it? You know, and so whenever this will happen, I usually encourage people to think of it this way. There's this really great passage that was from Mark Twain, I believe. I'm paraphrasing here, and essentially it's saying, it is better to be ignorant and admit that you do not know, right? Than it is to say that you know, but actually are bad at it, like actually don't know. Because when you say that you know, but you really don't know, it's dangerous because you don't feel like there's anything, there's not as much needed to be put into that thing, right?
Right.
It's a trap, you know. But it's a defensive mechanism for our brain to never admit that there might be some real big holes. But luckily, when it comes to art, it's really easy to reveal this problem to people, right? Like, so you could say that to me, like what you said, but I can show you how wrong you are. And like I did earlier, right? And you're like, oh my God, right? But you didn't see it before because maybe in your mind you're thinking, I'm already pretty good at this stuff, right? And then AJ comes in and like, no, you're not. Let me show you. And you're like, oh my gosh, I see it now. You know? Now, does that mean you're like a terrible artist? No, I don't think so at all. I think you have a good, like, you got a good head start for sure over somebody who's never drawn before, right? But like you said, like, how do these mofos do it this way? Well, you need to start to understand that maybe a lot of the things that you thought you knew, you actually don't know. And that's what's been keeping you like staying in one position for too long because of your own indirect bias. All right. And I say indirect because if you knew that that was holding you back, you wouldn't have let it hold you back, right? From the way that I'm hearing you talk, I don't think that's the kind of personality you are. So it's definitely unconsciously happening, you know? And so we'll definitely start to make it more consciously. It's going to be on the forefront of your mind by the end of this class. You bet your ass, you know? But it happens, man. Like I remember I had this student and he was like always like, he was like, dude, I'm so good at illustration, but there's something missing, man. I can't figure it out. And I'm like, well, it looks like you just don't know how to do your values and your perspective is like really bad. And those are pretty important to be good at illustration. He's like, no, man, I went to art school, bro. Like I studied underneath this artist and like I learned all my perspective drawings. I got like A's in those classes. It's not perspective. It has to be something else. And my values, like I do these master paintings, all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I've seen those and those are really great, but clearly it's not translating, you know? And he's like, no, it's something else. You know, it's definitely not my values. You don't get it. Like you gotta like, there must be something else going on. And we would have this debate like every class pretty much. And one day I was just like, I gotta like get through to him because it's clearly these are the problems, you know, because I see it every day and I'm always correcting it. And he's like, nah, it's not that. I must be something else. So that the day that I was able to convince him, what ended up happening was like, look, okay, let me ask you a question. It's like, who's your favorite artist? And he named me a couple artists, and I was like, all right, let's look at their work. So we grabbed a bunch of their work, and I had them all in front, right? And I was like, these are amazing. Like you picked some really good artwork. And he's like, yeah, thanks, man. And I was like, let me look for some references that are from my pool of favorite artists. So I grabbed some illustrators because he wanted to be illustrators. So we looked at illustrators. And so when we were looking at some of my favorite illustrators, and he's like, oh yeah, that guy's great, or this person's good, whatever, right? He started to acknowledge the greatness of even my own inspired reference, right? So then I was like, okay, now let's pull up your work and let's put it right next, like I put it all in a PSD and we'll put it right next to all these great masters, right?
Right.
Like put his work right in front and put it in a blast. And he was just like, oh, don't do that, man. Like, I don't need that. And I was like, but why? Like, why is it that you can recognize this insecurity? And what are all these artists doing that you don't have? Right? And he was looking at it, and then he was just like, oh my God, their perspective is like spot on.
Yeah.
And their values are like unmatched.
Right.
And he was like, God damn it. It was like one of those, like, I've been telling you this whole type of moments, right? And he was like, I should have been listening to you. And I told him, I was like, I know the problem is because you got in your own way, you know? And that's real dangerous because it's one thing if, you hear it online and you hear people say that you need to work on these things. It's another thing that if you don't see that it's happening, you know? And so I'm always cautious, or always try to tell people to be very cautious of this, and that it's always safe to just say you don't know, you know? It's actually a really good position to be in, because it means that there's room to know, you know? Again, I don't think you disagree with this principle. I think you understand this, and I think you're full-heartedly in agreement with this idea, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I definitely think it might be indirectly happening to you. You know what I mean? And you got to be very. That's like I said, it's really sketch when that's true.
Oh yeah.
And let me be clear, I'm not immune to this either. In fact, I was really bad at this in the beginning of my career. It was only until like the 17th person to tell me that I needed to work on my anatomy that I eventually was like, all right, sure, I'll try it. And I started working on my anatomy, and I was like, God damn it. It was always my anatomy. you know. And but I was just so stubborn even in the beginning. But I think it's just natural. I think most people feel this way. So I'm not just saying this as somebody as like a teacher, a wise sage that just happens to know this knowledge. No, I went through it myself, man. You know.
Oh yeah, I definitely know you did because you said you wanted to, you know, pretty sure you're just as, like you said, you have a heart. It seems like you have a really, based on what you said, you have a strong drive to want to do what you want to do, and
Yeah. No, I'm definitely stubborn too, right? And that
yeah,
stubbornness can get in the way. It could be problematic. It's really good because when you say, "Hey, I want to do a thing," you start doing the thing, right?
right,
But if people telling you something's wrong and you don't think so,
yeah,
that's really dangerous.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And even if you're nodding your head and you're like, "Yeah, sure," like seriously, it was like I don't think it was 17 people, but it was definitely a lot of people that were telling me like, "Gotta work on my anatomy, gotta work on my anatomy." It was only until I met my idol, one of my favorite artists in the industry, and he looked at me in the face and he was just like, "Yeah, like these are really cool ideas, but your anatomy is like really bad." And I was like, "E too, Brutus? E too?" You know, like you too, man. And then I was like, "All right. I mean, if he's even saying it, there must be something to it."
yeah.
So I went home and I started working on it, and then sure enough, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I remember when I started doing it, and I started seeing improvement right away. I was like, "What was I doing? What was I thinking?" And so then after that, whenever anybody told me something was wrong, I would still have that resilience. But then when they would leave the room, I'd be like, "Okay, it doesn't hurt to try what they suggested. I'll just do it to show them how wrong they are, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do it, and then they'll be right. And I'm like, dang it, why am I so stupid? You know? And then I just got really good at like starting to take feedback.
Right.
And to the point where I'm like, I just listen to everybody, and I framed it in this context of, everybody's giving me their 2 cents, and why would I just take those 2 cents? I get 2 cents richer now,
Right.
And from that same analogy, I'm like a millionaire. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because all that money has been given to me by all these epic artists and my peers and people that aren't even artists.
Right.
So I think it's time to wrap up. I will say though, if anyone has any kind of question, please ask now. I'll try to answer it quickly. But other than that, we can wait for the next session. We can do it then. No? Cool. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Appreciate y'all. Oh, wait, what?
No,
Who's that?
like the art? Is like you think it'll be in VR or?
Oh, the next stage of art?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can answer this really quickly and I can elaborate next time in class. But right now I can give you nightmares. It's probably going to be machine learning.
Right.
So imagine that art, like, so people like are really up in arms with like 3D artists and photo bashers at the moment. At least like a few years ago, it was pretty bad. But machine learning. So like, imagine if I just grab a bunch of images from my favorite artists, throw into some sort of software that can like paint for me, and then create like half a sketch based off of other people's designs and stuff like this, and then from there I can pick it up and start drawing my own stuff. I think that will be like the next thing that people will probably be like, "Oh my gosh," VR is only going to be an extension of what already exists now, right? Like there's only 3D softwares. It's just when you're sculpting in VR, it just feels way more natural, right? Specifically designing 3D sets and stuff. It feels just way more natural because you're in there, But it's not anything new. It's pretty much the same thing, just a different kind of way to perceive it, But machine learning would be something new. It would be a complete paradigm shift, right? Because then people like there was like that machine learning algorithm that can like draw a mountain and some rivers, by just color coding it. Like if you just draw like a blue shape with like a brown shape, it'll just know that that's water and those are mountains. So it'll take like photo bashing to the next level for sure, because at least with photo bashing, you have to like learn how to photo manipulate and put images together, right? That still takes some challenge. But imagine if like you had a software where you just paint like literally just solid colors to represent different types of materials. And then you just say render it and then put it at a daytime setting with the sun, to the east or something, just all this like type it in or just click on a checkbox and it just does it. Yeah, that's gonna be game changer. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, though. I don't think it'll be like next year type of thing, but definitely sooner than you would expect. But it's not like something to be too worried about yet. You guys are still pretty good. Okay. And plus the skill that you're learning is the kind of skill that will take full advantage of these types of tools, you know, like being the designer, the one that comes up with the visual ideas. Like that's still going to be really hard for a machine to kind of replicate, you know. But when that tool exists, I'm going to be using it. You know, I'm going to be all of a sudden an environment artist. It's going to be dope. So anyway, cool. I'll talk to you guys later. You guys have a great weekend, and peace out, friends. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.